Hey everyone, Rascal here.
And Mama, welcome to our podcast.
Today we're looking at one of our favorite shows, and what's considered one of the greatest adult animated series of all time,
King of the Hill. Now this slice of life Fox series shows the life of Texan Hank Hill and his family as he navigates the everyday lives and challenges of changing world in the most comedic and surreal way.
Yes. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, click notification for updates on future podcasts and all the pause videos.
Okay, this thing is anything like normal. It's like a slice of like regular show.
Right. Yeah.
There's so many things that have happened during this series, including Peggy having a skydiving accident and hitting the ground and not dying. And Cotton with no shins. That yes, this is anything but regular and normal.
And when it keeps it's sort of slice of life. Like yeah, it's somewhat grounded. I mean, the world doesn't implode like regular show, but that's about it.
Created by no other than Mike Judge, creative also of Beavis and Butthead. This was like something totally opposite of that show.
Yeah,
I've watched them both. They're both great shows, but King of the Hill, I would have to say, far surpasses the relatability of Beavis and Butthead. Because no, I'm not an idiot, so I don't relate to them. But they sure were funny. But this show really was something special when it was out. And then Rascal told me that they're actually having a reboot or a return.
It's a revival, yeah. So people are just waiting for that one.
Yes,
so they've been watching the old series. They put it back up on Adult Swim so people can watch either from the beginning or random episodes. And they've been making artwork and things that will be like when they return. How old will Bobby and the other younger characters will be? Will they add some new people? Will it be like Rocko's Modern Life and they'll have to react to all the modern things in the 2020s?
And did Mr. Strickland live beyond a couple of years after the series? Because
right.
The life he was living, we don't know.
Right.
So, yes, this is just a great show, and it has a huge following of fans. We know some personally on Twitter, and you can see the love this show has online.
Yeah.
Just bring up King of the Hill, and you can just hear the comments.
Yes.
Now you do have a small segment of people who have a right to feel the way they do, that it's not their cup of tea.
Right.
And for whatever reason, that's okay. But for the rest of us that love this show, there's so much you can relate to, including family members you may know that are like these characters, experiences you may have had, experiences you'll never have, and the cavalcade of guest stars that appeared on this show.
Oh yeah, just about every season has some guest stars, and there were about 12 seasons, I think, 12 or 13 seasons. It went off in early 2010s. Okay, thank you. They went off in about the early 2010s, and
it started in 1996.
Right, so they were on for a very long time, almost competing with The Simpsons and Family Guy for being a long-running show. So it looks like at that time, it looked like the creator was just ready to end the show.
I do remember in an interview he said he was just tired of doing it and he wanted to do something else, and that was it.
Right.
And the show was still in the top 10 of ratings on Fox. It hadn't lost any momentum. He just decided it wasn't for him to do anymore. So
who knows where it would be at now if it was still going like Simpsons and Family Guy and shows that refuse to leave. So you kind of wonder what it would be like if this was on at the same time as everything else all these years later.
Now, what really was stand out about this show, and I say was because we have no idea how it's going to have to be adapted now in returns. It was something really different. It was like watching the type of series that used to be live action from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but animated.
Right.
And you have Hank Hill, who's this real straight-laced, by-the-book guy. He's the king of the hill because he's the smartest out of the four guys that stand in the alley and drink beer.
Right.
But he's this really straight-laced, honest guy who loves his country, loves his family, loves his friends. He's a patriot. He loves God. He loves doing the right thing all the time.
Oh, and
except for he loves to drink beer too.
Right. Oh, and don't forget he loves propane and propane accessories.
Tell you what. So his character is on one extreme. And then you have Bill, who I'm going to bring up next. I know you thought I'd bring up the rest of the family. I'm going to go to Bill, who's the total opposite almost of Hank.
Right.
In terms of how his personality is. And he still has the same values. I have to say, the four guys that hang in the alley, Bill,
Dale,
Howard, Dale, and Hank, they all have the same values and morals.
Mm-hmm.
But Bill is like the worst representation of what a person could be due to some things he's done himself, but also due to some circumstances beyond his control.
Right. And there are so many episodes where sometimes you laugh at how much they bag on him, and then there are other times you do feel sorry for him. It's like, it seems like it's a little much for the characters. And there's actually a point, hilariously enough, when they get to later seasons, that Bill actually does start improving himself. The running gag is that he wants to get another wife or girlfriend or something so he won't be lonely. So he constantly has different women he's with throughout the series, and none of them usually stick. And when you thought the one was gonna stick, they changed the story. And then he stopped being so desperate after a while, and he started actually being a little more professional, a little more you can take seriously, and it would be other people that would mess it up because so many people were just used to Bill failing and women rejecting him, that him actually having a steady relationship freaked them out, creeped them out, and they demanded that he break up with them. It was just so out there for them.
And that was another great thing about the show. So many things that really exist in our own lives. For example, other people projecting their own ideas of how you may be, or the type of person you may be onto others.
Right.
How others see you, rising above limitations others may put on you. All of these things were integrated into this show beautifully.
Right.
And Bill was the conduit of those opinions and of those examples.
Right. It even had a whole episode based around that.
And the name of that was the
Bill Full of Dollars.
And that is one of the best episodes that really was kind of like the Simpsons, that was like predicted many things that actually have changed and are happening right now.
Yes.
And we do intend on doing a podcast on that episode soon.
Yes.
So stay tuned.
And it's funny you mention that because another character, Dale, as crazy as he is, and at the time that this stuff was made, everything was conspiracy theory of what if, aliens, he was into all that stuff. And then the biggest irony is that now when you rewatch the episodes, some of the stuff he says has actually come about. Not the stuff with the aliens, but stuff about society and people and how the government and everything works. Most of the stuff he has predicted or said is going on has actually come about and be true. So Dale isn't so crazy now, and that itself is crazy.
Yes, and he always says, Hank, you're my best friend. Mm-hmm. So the idea that he and Hank are best friends are like peanut butter and jelly, apples and oranges.
Right.
Ham, no burger. It's like, how in the heck were these two best friends? But they are. And he's a lunatic on the outside, but underneath he's really sweet. He loves his wife. He really loves his wife.
Yeah.
If you watch this show, you know why we say this man really loved his wife. For 14 years, she cheated on him with John Redcorn. And no matter what happened, he was too dense to know. No matter what happened, no matter how we treat him at times, no matter what happened, he really, really loved her. And I think that's one of the things that really stood out about his character. And he loved his son.
Yes.
Wink, wink.
Right.
And he always wanted the best for him. And even in one episode when he says, you gotta be with a wealthy family, you can't be with us. I'm gonna give you away so you can succeed and be better than I am. And it was like, okay, this is lunacy, but you know that the intention he meant it. He really loves his son.
Yes.
He loves his friends, even if he doesn't trust anyone but Hank. He loves his friends, but he doesn't have that patriotic belief that the other three have, as you did mention. But he's a great character. There was no character like Hank out there. There was no character like Dale. There was no character like Bill. And there's definitely was no character like Boomhauer.
Yeah, I tell you what a dangle character. He's so interesting. He's unique. He's so dangle, so different from everyone else. You can't say what the heck he's saying. No, there's dangle.
And he's supposed to be the good-looking one and the cool one.
Right. And they were like, you sure?
He's the one who has done better than the rest in terms of finances and his home and so forth. And he's supposed to be a favorite of the ladies.
Right.
And he's the one that's still single by choice.
Right.
Bill, as you know, was married, but he's no longer married. So the others are married or have been married at some point, except for Boomhauer.
Right.
And he has this one episode where he falls in love with a female version of himself and immediately expects her to want to marry him, which was really weird because knowing the games he played with women before he got called for it, you would think he would know better than to know that this woman did not want to be with him because she was just a female Boomhauer.
Right. And then by the end of the episode, he was so heartbroken, and Bill of all people had to encourage him to get back up. And from that point on, he learned this was not a way to treat women. He actually made friends with one of the women he was with and said, I know how this feels now. This wasn't right to do to you. Can we start over as friends? And then they didn't do like now they'll forget and put it back in later. Boomhauer really didn't have the same attitude with women. Right. And the biggest example when his brother came and was getting married and he was still messing around, and Boom was telling him, you can't do that, you're getting married and you're going around and still messing around with people. So they didn't go here and like forget later on and put it back in. He really didn't do this with women anymore. He was actually more respectable towards them and didn't go around all the time, and that was becoming the running gag for him up until that point.
And he also was the most loyal, I would say, out of them in terms of they could depend on him anytime he needed them.
Right.
And only once you saw him get angry when he discovered that his car was in the bottom of the lake and they had put it there.
Right.
That's an episode you're going to have to watch.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Bill because we didn't give Bill enough love. Yes, he has all these problems and things, but he is a member of the military. He's actually a barber for the military. He's the best barber in Ireland and all over Texas. He's also really loyal to his friends. Yes, he's cuckoo and has issues, but he's loyal to his friends.
Yes.
He will support them no matter what. And then I love when he would come out of the woodwork with these talents and skills you didn't know he had, like when he could speak French, and like when you learned that he was Bill the bulldozer in high school when he played football. Yes. And he had hair full of hell, and head full of hell. A head full of hair and muscles, and then he wasn't always the way he is. But again, he's also very loyal, very true to his friends. Right. Every now and then he'll do something dumb. Right. But when push comes to shove and they really need him, he's there. He is an honorable friend. He knows that he's lacking in many areas, and the thing I love about his friendship with Hank is that he depends on Hank to make him a better person, to help him be better, and he'll tell him, he knows that he's not much, he knows all this, but I depend on you to help me and tell me what to do and let me know when I'm wrong and to do right. And I thought that episode when he said that was really revealing of the relationship, and Hank accepted that was his part and his responsibility for being his friend. Right. They have a friendship, the four of them, that's unlike any friendship you've ever seen on any show. Yes. And I think that's another thing that really made this show extremely special and popular. Right. Because no matter what happened, no matter who tried to come in, no matter if someone made another friend temporarily, no matter what happened between the four of them, they always remained true friends to the end, and they've known each other since they were very young, and they all went to the same high school. Right. It's just that bond that's there that can't be broken, and it made it really special. Right. Now let's talk about some of the other main characters, like Peggy Hill. Right. 3-time substitute teacher of the year. Yes. Voiced by Kathy the Jimmy. Yes. And she has quite a lot of episodes we found out when we were rewatching the show multiple times, and it really was more in the beginning than it was later on. She started having a little more spares as it got further on, because a lot of the characters, like the neighbors and side characters, or even John Redcorn, started getting characters, and Peggy got a lot of them in the beginning, and majority of them had to revolve around her being a substitute teacher, wanting to teach, or having a high personal opinion of herself. Yes, very high, and pretty much dealing with the school, or people at school, or episodes concerned about her feet being too big, and they're really more personal type things. And despite all the stuff she says and
does have some low self-esteem when it comes to it, so she really says a lot of things that are like, what the heck are you talking about? Like, she doesn't really want to admit that these things are about herself.
And she also has a good heart, which is why I think she ended up with Hank. Besides, of course, them being attracted to each other and so forth, he knows that despite all Peggy's craziness and her delusions of grandeur and all this, she's really a good person, and she loves people. And when the right thing needs to be done, 95% of the time she will do it.
Right.
There's that 5% that you're like, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
Why are you doing that?
Right.
Why are you trying to trick people? What is wrong with you?
Right.
But you love her character despite that. And I think that the biggest thing for me, the biggest thing I really love is this is Kathy the Jimmy's real voice. It's not a voice she's making up like some of the other characters. It's same for Bill's voice actor.
Yes.
That's also his voice, kind of exaggerated, but her as Peggy Hill is her regular speaking voice, like J.G. Quintel. I was just so amazed when I saw her in an interview during the time the show was on, and she was speaking in the same voice. Oh my gosh, she's actually Peggy Hill. She sounds like that all the time. It was just like, oh my gosh, I love it.
Yes.
And she's a great character. She's a good wife, except for that 5%. And she's a good mother, except for that 5%. And she's a good friend when she can make friends.
Right.
And she's sort of has a friendship, a strange friendship, I would say, with both Ming and with Dale's wife, Nancy.
Yeah, it is. Because sometimes they can get along, and other times they'll be against each other depending on the situation.
She seems to have more enemies in terms of people she's always competing with, and people who want to take her down, and people she wants to prove that she's good enough and she's smart enough, and all these other things too. So I think that's another reason why she ends up not having as many friends as she could have, because of her competitive nature. But that's just Peggy.
And there's even a point where there's things that happen to Hank, and Hank most of the time wants to defend Peggy. Hank! Peggy usually doesn't defend Hank. Like, there was a point where they claimed he was buying X-rated material. And he's kind of and he's kind of a prude. He really doesn't like looking at anything inappropriate, whether it's okay or not, in private or not. He doesn't even like mentioning or talking about it unless it's just between him and Peggy. And Peggy just full on believed that Hank was doing this, and he kept telling her, "I don't rent those movies. I don't buy these things. Why would you think that?" And it's like, Hank is probably one of the cleanest men ever. Why would you think he was doing something like this undercover?
And he's the only character I've ever seen in an animated show or a live action show that is that clean, where he went through great lengths to prove that it wasn't his porn, and that he wasn't renting it, and that he wasn't buying it. They kept sending this garbage to the house, and he was getting so upset because he was like, "I didn't order this. Why are you sending me this?" And everyone kept saying, "Sure, Hank, sure." No one believed him. No one. So he took it upon himself to clear his name and to clear his reputation, and that's one of the best episodes to watch. And that's one of the times that Bill did help him and come to his senses. Like I said, he is a good friend. Now we got to talk about Bobby Hill. That boy ain't right. They stopped saying that later, but in the first season,
he wasn't. Like, and the whole thing of Bobby is that, Hank really wanted him to be sort of like himself, being into sports and propane and grilling, which he actually did know grilling later. He knew about roping cattle. There were some things,
and he had a great sense of humor. And he also was a good friend like his dad.
And there were some things that Hank liked that he did like. But a lot of times Bobby liked really strange things that do with pop culture and comedy.
That happened, he jumped on the bandwagon. Anything, he would copy anything and follow anything anyone did.
Anyone that looked cool to him, he wanted to emulate. And it would take a while before either he realized they weren't as cool as they thought, or
declare, it's hot in here. Oh my gosh.
And throughout the whole series, it's kind of like that. His goal, he wants to be a stand-up comedian and just be world famous. And he does get a lot of laughs out of a lot of people. And there are times, though, that even the comedy is challenged because either there are people who have different senses of comedy and tragedy is comedy to them. So unless you're suffering, you're not funny. Or they say you better make this funny or else we're gonna kick your behind. And it's like he has to find the humor in just about everything, because they'll even try to use the humor against him, where if you're not this type of funny, we're gonna hurt you. And it's like nobody believes when he tells them this is like he's gotta use the comedy to his advantage, and he really does try to use different types of comedy to where he doesn't get hurt or relieves situation or helps make a new friend. And it's not just he's making funny to be funny.
Now in the beginning they had some secondary characters that also are memorable before we get to a couple new ones that came later that became main characters as well.
Right.
You had Buck Strickland,
Yes.
who was just walking, festering
sleaze, yeah.
Yes, there's no other way to put it. And no matter what happened, Hank was loyal to him, a loyal employee, and he never made that man a manager.
Right.
So hopefully when they return, Buck finally allowed him to be a manager or to actually run the place, because he was no good at anything but being foul.
Right.
And then you had Cotton Hill, who's Hank's dad.
Right.
And he was a character, a very memorable character. He was the total opposite of his son.
Right.
And he had served in the war, World War II, and he had lost his shins. He got his shins blown off in the war.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow he was walking around with no shins. He got cut off by a foot when he lost his shins. And somehow he was walking around with no shins and still being active and productive. He would always call Peggy Hank's wife. He had some outdated ideas about women and many things. But he was a character that was memorable and in a lot of instances funny to laugh at because of the ridiculousness and extremeness that Mike Judge created him to be.
Right.
And you knew he was a parody. You
Right.
knew he wasn't meant to be taken seriously or a real person.
Right.
He was like the example of all of these extreme ideas and beliefs that just don't work.
Yeah.
Cotton Hill was the walking embodiment of them.
Right.
And that's why you couldn't hate the character.
Mm-hmm.
He was brilliant at making him this walking embodiment of everything that was wrong, but somehow you still cared about him because there were moments he would show humanity and do something nice for someone or caring, especially when he helped Peggy to walk again.
Right.
And those were the things that helped you to remember he's still human, despite he doesn't act like one. And he's still human, and he can have a caring nature.
Right.
Very rarely, it's like Peggy Hill's 95%, 5% is the reverse for Cotton. It becomes he's 95% just wrong and 5% right.
Right. And there's even a point where they had later, and unfortunately I don't like what they did to end his character, but before then there were actually points as time went forward, they knew they had to update some things about the show because when it was made. So it was a point where Cotton stopped talking about certain things that happened when he was out there, because there would be a running gag for him all the time.
Right.
And there were even times he wanted to, apologize for some of his actions and make amends. So it was showing he was getting better.
We're not going to mention them because we don't want YouTube to have flagged us for anything.
Right, so we'll leave it at that.
If you have watched the show, you know what they are. If you haven't, this is definitely a show you need to watch.
Right.
If you have ideas about how it is and you think it's one way, it's totally unlike anything you've ever watched, and it's nothing like you're going to expect it to
Right. Heck, this was even on Fox Kids for a time. They even had a little crossover commercial with Hank and the Silver Surfer. It's like, what the heck is this show again?
So, we talked about a couple of the secondary. Oh, we also got to mention Luann, of course.
Yes.
Who was Peggy's niece, her sister's daughter, no, her brother's daughter.
Yeah.
And Luann was also another special character. She was voiced by Brittany Murphy, who unfortunately passed away from illness a few years ago. And Brittany Murphy didn't sound anything like this character. All of her live action roles, if you've seen Clueless, you've seen her. None of her live action roles were anything like this character, sound anything like this character. She just made Luann Luann. She was brilliant at voicing this character and making you have a love-hate relationship with her.
Right.
She was ditzy, she was silly, she was everything that you wouldn't want a child to turn out to be.
Right.
But Peggy and Hank were the examples for her to be better. And I love how, I love how Mike Judge wrote that she had some examples to help her be a better person, and she ended up being better. She still was Luann. She still had those areas that it was just not going to ever be any improvement.
Right.
But from the beginning, when she came on the show to when the show ended, she improved, she grew as a character development, she got better, and she learned that she, even though her parents couldn't be depended on, and she wasn't sure if they loved her or not, she knew that she had Hank and she had Peggy, and that was really a wonderful way to write this character.
Yes.
It was like the Munsters with Herman and Lily.
Yes.
And even though Marilyn was supposed to be the ugly family member, they loved her no matter what.
Right.
And that's what it reminded me of.
Right.
So I love that. Now we got to mention Con and Ming and Con Jr.
Yeah.
And Doggy. There's no way that you can finish talking about characters and not mention them.
Or Lady Bird. That's it.
Lady Bird. Yes.
Yes.
And we have to mention that Ming was voiced by the wonderful, incomparable Lauren Tom.
Yes, and they came in really like the beginning of the series, season 1, and they were supposed to be new neighbors, and it was a running joke. They didn't know where they were from, and they told them they were the ocean, and the whole thing, you actually end up seeing more, right, and you kind of end up seeing, more of them as it went on, and they went from being like the new neighbors that it was a little weird to get along with because they were kind of afraid of being disrespectful towards them, and it was a lot of misunderstandings throughout the time. Then as it went on, Con just became a jerk. Sometimes he was just showing how much better he was than Hank. He had the better house, the better car, more money, better job.
Him hillbilly or redneck.
Yes, and it's like, okay. And he always wanted to get into Nine Rivers Country Club. And it was funny because you saw there was the different dichotomy of how his family was and how Hank's family was. And, they had their issues too, despite them having, clearly a little bit better off in terms of things they bought and owned. They still have this sort of issues too of trying to, get around in this country. And it was always hilarious seeing how they would do comparisons of what they would have and what Hank would have, and how they would always bounce off each other no matter the difference.
Now, Con has some of the best lines in the show. He was the comedic relief. He wasn't a joke. We want to make that clear.
Right.
He was not a joke. He was successful. They were a successful family. They were filled with love. And they had an episode where he and Hank realized they had a lot of things in common. But he was definitely the comedic relief.
Right.
He had some of the best lines ever of any character ever.
Yes.
And you had to love them. You could not hate them. You had to love them. They were hilarious and funny. And they were almost like an example of what Peggy and Hank could be in terms of social standing and status.
Right.
If they were to become really focused and that was their goal, but they wanted to live a simple life.
Right.
So I want to say that this show, again, is one of a kind. A couple things that stand out, and I'm sure some of you may be waiting for us to talk about. It made a lot of statements on events that were going on at that time.
Yeah.
And it handled them in ways that were tasteless and sometimes hilarious, but never as a joke or silliness or to brush off those events as things that were important. Mm-hmm. They brought up a lot of controversial topics, and they also, there were characters within this show that each character or family represented some element of society at that time that did exist.
Right.
And it was brilliant how Mike Judge created this show to represent exactly, perfectly everything that was going on during that time and people that existed, and a lot of different attitudes during that time reflected in the characters. There are some things that were said during the show that now cannot be repeated because there's a lot of different ideas and some turns in our world in regards to societal norms and so forth. So it's going to be interesting to see when the show returns how they handle those changes and how they're reflected in it. I know Mike Judge can do it.
Yeah.
If he did something as brilliant as that from that time period, he's going to do something just as brilliant now. And I know it's going to be just as funny and hilarious, and he's going to address those issues again tastefully, sometimes with humor, sometimes a little seriousness, but addressing them, not running away from them, and making us not only see things in a different light sometimes, but also see the silliness of some of the beliefs that just don't make sense. He's brilliant at social commentary. That's definitely how I would describe Mike Judge.
Yes. And we can't wait for the show to come back. We saw that Beavis and Butthead have returned on Paramount Plus with the new movie and series. So now we're just waiting on King of the Hill to make its faithful return.
Absolutely.
And how will it hold up now with Simpsons and Family Guy and Bob's Burgers? Some are regarded as still some of the best animated shows, and others kind of going down in quality. We really want to see how they handle that.
Some things I hope return. I hope they use the same animation. I really hope they don't upgrade it. I would
Right.
love to see it just pick up like it never left.
Right.
And
Like Rocco, yeah.
Yes, and be the same animation. I hope that they don't have a lot of the characters we know and love have passed on. The only one that possibly we think may be gone is, again, Buck Strickland.
Right.
Cotton, unfortunately, was taken out, and we really hated how his character was killed off
Yes.
during the original running.
Yeah.
But that's how Mike Judge chose to do it. But we hope all of them return, all the characters that we know and love. And I also hope, again, that he doesn't shrink and is afraid of doing the social commentary.
Right.
I hope that he's just as bold in doing it and reflecting the society as a whole. And that's what the show did perfectly. And it's something that no other show animated has ever done, and a lot of live action shows haven't done it as well. So Mike Judge is brilliant. He really is. And to see him go from Beavis and Butthead, something that's just so silly and just nonsensical and just fun, to something like this, it shows that, again, he can do more than one thing. He has range, and he's capable of having you stick with him the entire run of a series.
Yes.
And actually want to cry when the show ends.
Yeah.
So thank you, Mike Judge, for King of the Hill. We're looking forward to its return. If you've seen King of the Hill, you love it as much as we do, or you don't, let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you're not a fan, tell us what about the show made you not like it. We really are interested in hearing your thoughts, whether they agree with us or not. We're always willing and love hearing what you have to say.
Right.
And if you haven't seen it, you can purchase it by season online on Amazon.
Yes.
I think there is a full series version available, but it's almost $300. The best bet is to look for used versions and buy those.
Right.
We own seasons 1 through 6, and now we're trying to get them
Right.
before the serial comes out,
Right.
and they jack up the prices
Right.
of the DVDs once they're out.
And just like with Hank and the others in the alleyway, we love to hear your thoughts. We really want to discuss it because it's just you need your daily dose of the news from your friends.
I had to have the intro in here because that's also one of the most iconic intros ever done, and one of the most iconic themes done in a show as well.
Right.
Again, it was different. It reflected Texas. It reflected Southernness. It reflected everything in that short intro. It was just perfect.
Right.
So thank you for joining us. We really, really appreciate you. Feel free to share this on Community Tab or however you share. Feel free to tell friends about it. If you love King of the Hill and you have friends or family members that love it, have them listen to our podcast as well. We really appreciate it.
Right. And if you haven't already, subscribe for updates, weekly videos on your favorite anime series, animated shows, and all things animation.
And stay tuned for our review of the Revival series as well as the episode A Bill Full of Dollars.
Yes.
Because once you hear what this episode is about and we show you and discuss the topics that are now happening now, reflecting society decades before it happened, you're going to know how special this show really is.
Right. So, thank you so much for watching Mask Entertainment.
And at Mom Entertainment,
Have a fantastic day.
peace. I tell you what.
Yep. 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 Mm-hmm.